Begin the Quran Daf Mesechta Yevamos Daf Nun Dal. Begin 7 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara begins explaining the source, the halacha of our Mishnah that we described, opening up this parak Abal Yevimtoi, that any type of bia on these Yevamos is going to be a kinyan. The Gemara says, how do you know this halacha that any type of bia is going to be a valid kinyan of the mitzvah of Yibum? Shares corresponds to Bekazach and the Cheskel to any time Daf. Achayim B'Shem joining today's Daf. Some of these are going to discuss in today's Daf are, like we said, the source for the halacha that all forms of bia fulfill the mitzvah of Yibum. Misnamnim is the halachic concept that someone could be in the state of dozing off, so in some sense he's up, in some sense he's sleeping. And also the source of the halacha that hara is a bia in regard to Yisui Arayis, that even though it's not a full act of bia, in still the prohibitions of Arayis, that would still be qualified as the Isser of bia. So begin the current Daf. As we said in the Mishnah, in the previous Daf, Habali Yevimtoi, we said whether b'shagi, whether b'mezid, whether b'oinus, by mistake, or with sinful intent, or he was coerced, or was willingly, either way, we said it's going to be a valid act of bia. Says the Gemara, 7 lines down at the top of the Yevamos Daf, from where do we know this halacha? Says the Gemara, turn around in the Brisa. Pasuk says, Yevama Yavoy Oleha, that is mitzvah. In other words, there's a mitzvah with bia more than it is going to be with chalitza. That is one interpretation. Another interpretation is, which is the one we really want, the one to explain the halacha of the Mishnah. It says in the pasuk, Yevama Yavoy Oleha, her Yavam will have bia with her. That's bein b'shegig, whether by mistake, bein b'mezid, whether with deliberate sinful intent, bein b'oinus, whether he was forced, bein b'ratzon, whether willingly. That's what the pasuk is coming to teach you. Yevama Yavala, whatever type of bia, it's going to be valid. Says the Gemara, how can you say that it's teaching you this halacha, but va'afik la mitzvah? You already told me that you need Yevama Yavala to tell me that ideally the mitzvah of Yibum should be done before chalitza. That's what Yevama Yavala is coming to tell you, not to tell you any type of bia. It's coming to tell you that ideally we want bia. So how can you tell me that it teaches the halacha of the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, no. La mitzvah, that which we taught in the first interpretation, that ideally we're telling you we want bia before chalitza, that we know from a different pasuk. That's meve'im leyachbetz ishnafka. We learned that, and if the man doesn't want to do bia, he doesn't want to do yibum, then he does chalitza. Which the inference is hachafetz, but if he would want to, then yibum. Then the mitzvah is do yibum, and therefore b'chias across when we have this other pasuk of Yevama Yavileho, that's going to teach us the halacha of the Mishnah of bein shagi, bein b'mezid, bein b'oinus, bein b'ratzon, no matter what format it took, as long as he did the act of bia, it's going to be a mitzvah of yibum. That's one brisa. Tani d'chulin, another brisa. The brisa says Yevama Yavileho is taking the same words of the pasuk that we just explained and darshaning other things from it. When it says Yevama Yavileho, har yavam, Yevama is not. It's saying har yavam will be Yavileho, will have bia with her. What does it mean bia? That means kedarka in the normal way of how intimacy is. Ulukacha, and when it says the pasuk, he will take her, that's shaloi kedarka. That's coming to say even in the unnatural way, which coming to say that even if he lays with her in an unnatural way, then it's going to be kind of her as a yevama. Now, additionally, the end of the pasuk says, as you see over here, the pasuk is Yevama Yavei Aleho L'kacha Le'isha V'Yibma. So we just explained Yevama Yavei Aleho is kedarka, L'kacha Le'isha Shalei kedarka, and then the last word V'Yibma. So without the hey, we're just saying V'Yibeim. So that would tell me when it says V'Yibeim, what is that teaching? Because bia gomer is ba. When we just told you that you're doing an act of bia, it's saying that cohabitation is what concludes the kinyan of the Yevama. Meaning, it's coming to exclude Ve'im Kesef V'Shtar Kamer Ba. But money and the document will not conclude, meaning what the chiddush is, because we know in the beginning of Kedushin it talks about a woman could be acquired with 3 ways, kesef, shtar, and bia. What we're telling you regarding a yavama, only one of those 3 will work, which is that of bia, but it will not work with kesef and shtar. You cannot conclude the kinyan with her, with money or the document. Now, but there's an extra hey. It could have said v'yibeim. What's v'yibma? That's to tell you, you do yibum tahar bal karcha, even forcibly, even against her will. That will still be, generally a woman cannot be acquired ela l'daita, but here, by yivama, it doesn't work, it can even be against her will. Now, the Gemara goes back to explain, we had mentioned in the first brisa, davar acher. We said another interpretation in the pasuk of Yevama Yavei Aleho is to tell you, bein b'shegig b'chulu mezid b'oinus b'ratzon. Says the Gemara, how could you say that? But you already used it in the second brisa, meaning in the first brisa we explained why the first brisa's first interpretation is not difficult, because we said, to tell you that it's l'mitzvah, that you don't learn out from Yevama Yavei Aleho, that you learn out from Imloyach B'Tzeish. But what do you do with the second brisa? The second brisa tells you the words Yevama Yavei Aleho is coming to teach you not b'mezid b'oinus b'ratzon, it's coming to teach you as kedarka in the normal way. Says the Gemara, who that halacha that you know that bia is in the normal way, vaginal, is melohakim la'achav shem nafka. That you learn that from a different pasuk, where it talks about the mitzvah of Yibam is to go ahead and establish for his brother a name, that he could create a child for his departed brother who didn't have any children. Obviously, it's b'mokim shehekim shem. Obviously, it's in a place where you could create a child. And therefore, I don't need Yevami Yabalad to tell you Kedarka. Because Kedarka I know already from Lahakim La'achiv Shem. So therefore, he has a crow, and the pasuk is telling me Yevami Yabalad is telling me, like for the halacha of the Mishnah, which that's what's coming to teach me, but neither one of those two other interpretations. I don't need it to teach me the halacha of the mitzvah, because that I know Mayach Mitzvah, and I don't need it to teach me of Kedarka, because that I already know Lahakim La'achiv Shem. Now the Gemara goes back to something we mentioned on the previous Daf, Kufa. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, he says Yashan, that was the top words on this Amid. If someone's sleeping, like although they're having an active bia, but if you're sleeping in the moment when it was happening, he's not going to require Yivam. Why? So the Gemara says, because the Amakar, the pasuk says Yavama Yava Yaleha, her Yavam should have bia with her, which means until he's intending for an act of bia. When he's sleeping, he's not having in mind for a Maisa Bia. That was what we said from Taisis, not like Rashi, who said that just that there's no Bar Das. No, it's just, you have to have, it can't be Misasik. It has to be that you're intending to do Maisa Bia. When the person's sleeping, he's not having in mind for a Maisa Bia. Says the Gemara, there's a contradiction. But technically in the Brisa says Ben Yashin, whether he's up, awake, or sleeping, it is going to be a valid kinyan. Says the Gemara, Amos say Ben Ava Ben Yeshena. It's not him. He has to be awake because he's doing the Maisa Kinyan. He's doing the active acquisition. She, whether she's awake or she's sleeping, that's going to work because she's just karka. She doesn't have to do anything. She's a passive participant. She can even be balkarcha, so that she could be sleeping. But he has to be awake. Says, well, no, you can't say that either because Matano in the Brisa, bein erhu, bein yashin hu, whether he's awake or he's sleeping, bein avrehi, bein yashin, whether she's sleeping or she's awake. So you see clearly, even if he's sleeping, it's going to be a valid Kinyan. So how do we resolve this? That it contradicts Rabbi Yehuda, who says that he has to be awake. Says it's actually, they're both right. He's awake, but not awake. He's dozing off. And that's the state that he has to be in. Says what's the characteristic of dozing off? So Ravashi says it's nim, it's sleeping but not sleeping. Tir, it's up but not up. What does that mean? Where they call him and he responds, but he can't speak logic. When you remind him of something, he remembers. That's where we're saying that's the sleeping that the Brisa says is going to work. Meaning, if he's really sleeping, like if he just says, no, it's not going to be a kinyan because either no das or because it's not mechab l'maisabiyah. But we're saying that when he's sleeping, he's like, yeah, wow, it's that, yeah, okay, yeah, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's answering. That's the case of sleeping that is going to be a valid bia to be a kinyan in the Yevamot. Now, additionally, Gufa, we had mentioned also on the previous stuff, on the top of this Amid, that Rabbi said, Nafal min hagag v'nitka. If let's say he falls off from the roof and he gets inserted into the woman, Chay babar dvar, so he's liable for 4 things. Ubivim delekana. But, and that's what we brought it in for, we wanted to say that it's not going to be kin in the Yevamah, and therefore that wasn't going to be a valid option of saying that would be the case of Oynis, that he fell off the roof and that he got inserted. Now, but the 4 things that he's chayiv for is benezik, is damages, where we evaluate the woman as if she was a maidservant being sold. How much was she worth up until this trauma, and how much is she worth less? And b'tzar, we compensate her for the pain. B'sheves, now for the loss of work. U'beripui, for the doctor bills. Now, that's only 4 of a b'leishus l'mechayev. But for embarrassment, which is a humiliating experience, he's not going to be liable. Why? So the Gemara explains. Because the Master says, although we know adamud la'ilam, ben yashin, your person's liable for damages, even if he by mistake. But baishas is an exception to the rule for humiliation. That's only if he had intent, and here he fell off the roof, and therefore he's not going to be liable for baishas. Now, a related discussion regarding intent for the Maisa Bia, he says, let's say someone intended to rub himself up against the wall, which, as Rashi explains, although he's stimulating himself, but it's not, you can't call that intending for a Maisa Bia. You can't say that he's intending to do an act of cohabitation That's why the English translation, the way it's used that word, cohabitation, it has to be with a partner and not an inanimate object. So therefore, if he does that and then he tich b'yevimtai, and then he gets inserted into the Yevama, like Kana, he's not going to acquire. I mean, if he's intending with a wall and then he gets the woman, that's not having kavanah for ma'is to be, like we said before. That's not going to work for a kinyan in the Yevama, like we said regarding sleeping. And now, however, letich b'behema, but let's say he intended for an animal, and b'tich b'yevama, again we said because for kinyan yiyim works for shaygig and b'meiz ba'in, it doesn't make a difference what you, as long as you intend for ma'is to be, albeit with an animal, and it gets inserted into the Yevama, Kana, he acquires the kut to come l'shem bi ba'ilam. He intended for some act of entry, which is what bia is. It requires some type of you have to understand exactly to what extent, how do you qualify this exactly, but there is some act of bia with an animal, and then that would work with the Yevama. Now, we said in the Mishnah that, and not only with intent it doesn't make a difference, the bia is going to always work, but even if in the quality, not only like in the quality of the bia, echad ha'ara, whether it was only ha'ara, as we'll explain shortly what that actual is, but it's not a full act of bia, even that will be kind of by the Yevama. So Amar Uli says, Minayin lahara min haTorah. Where do we know hara that it works biblically? Where do we find that should be considered as a ma'aseh bia? Says the Gemara, it says in the pasuk in Vayikra. It says the isha sheyishka v'isha dava. If a man's going to lay with a woman that's menstruating, a nida, the gilas ervasa, and he's going to reveal her erva. So as mekayre hera, her source, he's bearing. Which mikan, from here we see lahara min haTorah, that essentially hara is bearing the woman's private area, and in a contact form, which is essentially what Ogila Rayis is. So you see that the concept of hara min haTorah. Says Gemara Ka'ash Chanida. This pasuk is only by the Isser Erva of a Nida, a menstruating woman. Shad Rayis Minayin. How do you know this would apply to all other Rayis? And the Chitim, if you can say, what do you mean? Neilif ben Nida. Let's learn that from Nida. Yeah, that's an Erva and this an Erva, and just like that has a so it will be it. No, it's not true. Because Mala Nida, I can tell you, what do you find by Nida that we're going to be stringent, we're going to have Hara? Shkimetamas Boila. It's a very unique chumrah that applies to Nida. That the man who has relations with the Nida actually has the halachic tumah like the Nida, and he becomes tumah for 7 days, as the pasuk says in Vayikra Tezvav. But he nidasa alav, but tumah shebizim, he becomes tumah for 7 days. Now that's a very unique stringency. So maybe that's what we said the stringent about. Who said we say it about all our rights? Okay. El Ashim Eishas Ach. Said the Gemara, fine. We won't learn it from Nida, we learn it from Eishas Ach, from the brother's wife. What do we learn over there? The Chassid says, it says, if a man's going to take his brother's wife, Nidahi. Says the Gemara, what? What do you mean? The brother's wife is always in need, like she never stops bleeding, she's always menstruating? No, Ella, rather kin nida, like a nida. That's what the pasuk coming to tell you. Which is what's like a nida? We just brought a source. Ma nida, just like nida, there's a liability for but so too the pasuk coming to tell you, Eishes Ach is always also going to be liable with her. And we'll learn all other rayas from Eishes Ach. Says the Gemara, no. There's an interesting stringency that also applies to the brother's wife. There's an ability of a person, the rabbis, to increase more wives on his brother with the Isra of Eishes Ach. Why? If he wants to, he could get engaged to 1,000 women. And therefore, all those women are going to be now usher to his brother as Eishes Ach. Now, so as Rashi points out, so yeah, all arayos that become forbidden because of marriage, like for example, his father's wife, or his daughter-in-law, or his mother-in-law, or his wife's sister, all those that come through ishus, you could learn from Eishes Ach, which is also usher through marriage. But regarding his mother, or his sister, or his daughter, or things like that, which you don't have the ability to be marba, you can't create these arayos, that we do know from that hara would be usher over there. So it says in Ma'ela, you're right. Asya ma'achais av ve'em. So we can learn now achais av achais em from the father's sister and the mother's sister. That's it. The pasuk says in Vayikra, it says ve'erbas achais imcha achais ivicha leisikal. You're not allowed to be intimate with your mother's sister or your father's sister. Ki hasheira hera, because his relative he has done hara. Which again, it means just the as we'll see exactly what that means. But it's just bearing it. It's not full act of consummating a relationship. Now, says the Gemara, wait a second, you could even refute that how could you learn the Ola rise from there? What do you find the stringency by the father's sister and the mother's sister? It's a prohibition that comes by itself. And therefore, like Rashi explains here too, so you could resolve, let's say, his mother, his sister, his daughter, and things similar like that. But you wouldn't be able to resolve arayos that are forbidden because of kedushin. Because that's not the same thing. Those are blood relatives, not marital relatives. So how do you know marital relatives? So the Gemara says, okay, wait a second. Obviously, mechadul asi, so you wouldn't be able to learn that from either one, but teisachad metarti. Why don't you learn that one from two? Because each one you're saying has the inverse stringency of the other. So the Gemara, no, it's not true. Mehei teisah, from which one of the two are you going to learn out from? As we see over here, there's three different sources that we had that says hara nida. It's just the Gemara is going to say which one of those two are you going to learn out? Because teisim eishazach, if you're going to say, okay, let's learn out from eishazach and b'chais av aim, where if you're going to ask and say, wait a second, how can you learn that from achais av and achais aim? That's the Issa B'Me'elav. I'll tell you, Eishes Ach Techiach. Eishes Ach is not a natural one that comes through marriage, and still there's the Issa B'Ra. And if you can tell me, well, how do you learn from Eishes Ach, which is B'Yad L'Rabbis, well, Achais Ava'im would disprove that, well, you cannot be married with that. And you go back and forth, and the common denominator of both of them is that they're forbidden as erva, and we make Haralik Marbia. So I'll learn all arrays from this halacha. Says the Gemara, no. What the problem with that is malahanach, what we find by those two of Eishes Ach and Achais Av Achais Aim, is Sheken Asurim Mishum She'er. Ultimately, their prohibitions are because of relative, meaning you would be able to learn that olders are forbidden because of a relative. But Eishes Ish, the prohibition of Eishes Ish is not because of a relative of yours, it's just a general prohibition. Not because you're related to that woman somehow. How would you know the Isser of Eishes Ish? You wouldn't know that from the two of them. Okay, Ela Tesim and Nida. No, let's learn that from a different two. From Nida, V'chais Av V'chais Ein. Nida and the father, sister, and the mother, sister. Well, no, that's also difficult because Malahanach, what did we find by those two? Shekin Isa B'Me'elav. Those two are prohibitions that come by themselves. The woman, you're not making that prohibition. She's menstruating, and the father's sisters, you're not doing anything with that. So how would I know those that come through Kedushin? So Elreda says, the Gemara, I'll tell you which two. Taste in Menid of Eshazach. That's the ultimate one. You learn from Nida and the brother's wife, because the my parchas, what are you going to ask over there? Right? There you have Abba Me'ela from the Nida, and you have the one that comes from Kedushin from Eshazach, and that includes every single type of erva. However, Maskeb La Revacha Beredav Iki says, wait a second, Mala Nida Be'eshazach, you still can't learn that from those two either, because Shekain Ein La Mehetu B'Chaya Oisran. They don't have any permissibility in the lifetime of the thing that's making them forbidden. Meaning, as long as a person is alive and she's flowing blood, which for the Isra of Nida, and so to the brother's wife, when as long as his brother is alive, there's no heter, even if he divorces her, she's still forbidden. So, Toima Be'eshes Ish, how are you going to say regarding the Isra Bara, regarding a married woman, Sheken Yeshla Heter B'Chaya Isra, there, she actually can be permitted in the lifetime of the thing that's making her forbidden, which is her husband, if he gives her a get. So how do you know her role is going to be usher by Eshes Ish? Because that is a leniency that the other two don't have, and maybe it won't have that Isser. So, but first the Gemara asks on the wording that was the Gemara was asking. Amalei Rav Achim Adifta Ravina says, wait a second. Atu Nida Eshes Ach, you really think that Nida and Eshes Ach, B'chaya Oishin Hu De'elam Heter? You were making it sound like, the Gemara is asking on the wording of the questioner, you were making it sound like that, oh, in the lifetime of the thing that makes them forbidden, then there is no heter. But let's say after that, Yeshlam heter, that they do have a heter. In other words, you're trying to say that as long as the man is alive and the woman is flowing blood, or the brother is alive, that's going to be forbidden. But the inference was that, but after that, then they're automatically permitted? It's not true, says the Gemara, because neither is Getintam and Beis, but Yomi Talia Milsa. That's dependent on days. So like as Rashi explains, even what quote unquote makes it usher if it dies, meaning, what would that mean? Even if she stops seeing blood, she's still going to be forbidden for 7 days. So you can't tell me that it's only problematic b'chaya oisron, but the inference is when it's not b'chaya oisron, like she stopped the blood, that she would automatically be permitted because she's not, she's actually needed for 7 days. And so to Eshes Ach, a brother's wife, the Badim Tali Rachmana is dependent on children. Meaning, if he has sons, even when he dies, she's still forbidden. So why you tell me like b'chaya oisron, but it sounds like after the oisron it's going to be permitted? So the Gemara says, no, okay, you're right. We didn't say the question perfectly. What we meant to say is like this: Malanida be'echasach. What we find by nida be'echasach, would you tell me there's a source where we say by both of them haraz asr that wait a second, shekain ein oisron matira. The thing that makes it forbidden does not have the ability to make it permitted. Something else can make it permitted. Like let's say a nida. What makes her forbidden is the dam. When the dam goes away, she doesn't become permitted. The dam cannot permit her. The days will permit the nida. So too, Eshes Ach, the brother doesn't permit her. When he divorces her or he dies, that's not what permits her. When he does without children, childlessness is what permits her. Time of Eshes is, and that's what the Gemara's question was. Well, regarding a married woman, that what makes her forbidden, which is her husband. When he divorced her, that actually permits her. Who said hara would make her forbidden? Who said that the Issa hara by Eshes Ish, if it doesn't have the stringency that both Eshes Ach and Nida has, where there the Isur cannot be matter. Here by Eshes Ish, the Isur can be matter. Who says it can have the Issa hara? So rather, the Gemara concludes a different source. This is what's known as Hekesha de Rabbi Yomi. So it's Rabbi Yomi says, "V'teim sense Rabbi Huna Rabbi Shua." Omakar, this is mentioned many times. This Hekesh in this Seder of Nashim. That Omakar, the pasuk is of Yikra. It says, "Kikola sheyasu, Kikola te'emes." So Elab is going to do from all these abominations, where that's these parashiyas that we have now, Parsha Achrei Ma'is, that it talks about the Isurei Arayis. So it says, whoever's going to do from all these abominations, we lame Yom Kippurim by Mincha, the Nechas or Navashas or Isis. So the souls who do this will get karas. So hukshu kol arayis kol nida. All the arayis are being compared to nida, meaning, as Rashi explains, it's not that all being compared specifically to nida. It's just that all the arayis are being compared one to the other, because it's saying kol hata'evus eila. So and nida is written over there in the parasha of arayis. So therefore, man nida bara, just like we know nida bara, where it says explicitly in the pasuk is mekayla hera. Avkol bara, so to all the arayis is also going to have the halacha with just hara itself. So now the Gemara has a problem. Wait a second. Ve'ela, so you told me that everything is learned out from Nida from Akesha to Rabbi Yomi. So Nida d'chsiv gabe Eshes Ach. We had brought originally on Amen Aleph that how do we know hara be'eshes Ach? We know it because it says the word Nida be'eshes Ach. So when Eshes Ach is always Nida, we said no, like Nida that has the Isur Bahara, so to Eshes Ach. But Lamali, what do you need it for? Eshes Ach is also one of the arayis that are being compared to Nida. Why do you have to say Nida he? Compared to Nida, if everything is being compared to Nida already. Says the Gemara, you're right, it's come to teach you something else. It's come to teach you, like the Rav Huna. So Rav Huna says, Remez li Yevama min HaTorah. What's this, an allusion, a source, for Yevama from the Torah? Says the Gemara, Minayin, what do you mean with the source for Yevama? Haksav Yevama Yavala. When it says in the Torah, Har Yavim should I be with her? El Rada says, no, what we're asking is, Remez li Yevama shasura b'chaye baila. What's the allusion? What's the source that Yevama is forbidden in her husband's lifetime? Meaning, if his brother divorces his wife without children, and there's Yevama, how do we know she's forbidden when her husband is still alive? Minai. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? What type of question is the high smart? There's logic. What's the logic? I mean, Taisa explains that actually, since the Torah permits this Yevama after he dies, Taisa explains what the Gemara is pointing out is it's not logical to really say that she's forbidden in her husband's lifetime. That's what the Gemara is asking. How do you know? Because it's not logical really to say that the pasuk is coming to permit you with a positive commandment to override a negative prohibition that has karas, unless you have explicitly a pasuk that's proving that you are. So that's really what Rav Huna's question is. How do you know that the woman is forbidden b'chaye bayla? How do you know the Torah only permits that? No, the Torah would not really come to say something that always with issa of karas, and now you're saying it's permitted. So how do you know? Maybe she is permitted b'chaye bayla. But the Gemara says no. Sorry, it's logical. But the Omer Achman al-Acham is about from the fact that the Torah tells you that after her husband dies, she's permitted. What do you mean? Isn't that machlada b'chaye bayla? So isn't the inference that when her husband's alive, she's forbidden? Says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. You don't have a Talmudic cup then if you're saying like that. V'dilma la'acham is bayla mitzvah. Maybe after the husband dies, that's a mitzvah. Maybe when their husband's alive, then it's permitted, like Taisa said, that it's not a mitzvah, but it's not forbidden. And that's why it makes sense after la chamis that you would have a mitzvah. Or another approach you could say is, You're right. The Torah is telling you only after a husband dies, that's when you're going to have the mitzvah of yibum. And the inference is, but you're right, when her husband's alive, no, she would be forbidden. But all you're going to have then is what's called v'lav haba machlal aseh. That's a negative prohibition derived from a positive commandment, which is an aseh, is only going to be prohibited by the force of an aseh. But you wouldn't have a chiv of kares. How do you know that she's considered a bona fide erva of kares when her husband is still alive? So Amakra, it says Meikra, it says V'isha sheyikach es eishes achav. If a man's going to take his brother's wife, nidahi, she's a nida. Again, so like the explanation is, V'chi eishes achav nidahi, what do you think? The brother's wife is always a nida? Elikinida, rather like a nida. Now, we're not saying like we said on Amad Alf with Hara, because that we know from Akish Rabbi Yena. Rather, it's coming to teach you man nida just like a nida. Although at a later point in time she's going to be permitted, but b'shas yisura b'karas, when she's in her isra of nida, she has a punishment of karas. So do the brother's wife also. We're comparing to nida to tell you, although she is going to be permitted at a later point in time when her husband dies. But when her husband is still alive, it's going to be kares like nida, not an isra aseh of derivation that's saying it's only permitted la'achar, but afterwards it would be Yevamos Daf telling you there's a aseh only after, but before you would have an isra aseh. No, it's even going to be a chiv of kares. That's what you're learning out from nida. We're comparing it to nida. A similar type of question the Gemara asks. Ella, so you told me that the Torah mentions a hara by nida, and that's how we know all the other rayos. The question is, if you recall again another one that we had brought three sources for hara. We first brought nida, then we said, oh, you can't learn from nida, so we brought eshesach. They said, okay, you wouldn't learn that from there either. Then we brought the mother's sister and the father's sister. So now that we know everything from nida, from Akish Rabbi Yena, we have to now, what are those sources teaching us? So eshesach we just told you because comparing to nida for something else, not for hara, but it's going to teach you that it's going to be a punishment of kares when the husband's still alive. But now the question is, hara that it says by the father's sister and the mother's sister, what's that coming to teach me? It says the Gemara, it's like Ravina had asked from a Rav. If let's say someone does just hara by a male, and a homosexual act, he doesn't do full penetration, he just does hara, which we're going to explain shortly again what hara is. It's just initial contact. What's the halach over there? Now the question is, bezachar, regarding a male, what are you talking about? The pasuk says in Yikra that a male should not be laid with mishkevei isha, the way a man lays with a woman, because that's an abomination. That's what Ksiva says. So, since by a woman we know hara is considered mishkav, as we know from Akish Rabbi Yena, so of course that's forbidden by a male, because by a male it says mishkevei isha. So how can you tell me that that's what we're learning out and that's what we're going to compare? What's even the question? Of course that's going to be a problem. So the Rebbe says the Gemara, no, his question was about behema. If someone does hara in an animal where he doesn't finish the act of bia, that's maho, what's the halacha? So Amalei Rabba, so Rabba said to him, you're right. If hara by the father's sister and the mother's sister is not really teaching you anything, because the Asibakish Rabbi Yena, as we mentioned before, that we know it from the comparison of Rabbi Yena, which compares all the rayos to each other. That question that you have is actually where we know it from. We know the hara behema, that from the extra term of hara by achos av achosem. That's what it's coming to teach us. Now, says the wait a second. Mechti, let's see. Behema, an animal, that is chiv misid besni. That is liable for capital punishment. Now, my time eksiv lahara dida. Why are you going to write and allude to the hara of a chiv by behema? Kebechiv krisis. The father's sister and the mother's sister is not from those that are liable for the death penalty. It doesn't say misa by there. It's only chiv of kares. The person dies young. Why are you writing in the hara by achos avachosim to allude to the hara of behema, which has chiv misid bezdin? Lichtav gav misid bezdin. Why did you write it like Rashi says, for example, by imai, his mother-in-law? And then there it'll be unnecessary over there, and you'll say, Indian, if it's not teaching anything over there, because no from Akish Rabbi Yena, they're going to teach you regarding that of behema, and then Mrs. Bezdin. Why are you alluding to it by a chiyav of kares? So says the Gemara, good question, but I did the Kuli Cross, since the whole pasuk by the Achais Av, Achais Ein in Parshas Kedoshim, next week's Parsha, is L'drasha Asi. It's all coming to give to Darshan anyway, as the Rebbe is going to teach later on. So so once we're already darshaning things of extra, we also write harav. It's also unnecessary. L'drasha for a drasha al behema. You're right. We would allude to it by chidnis does, but anyway, that's extra. So to speak, the Torah already put in that of harav behema over there to darshan it over there, even though that's only chiv across. Says my drasha. What's this drasha? What's this extra psukim that we're already expounding? Things. The time I learned the brayso. Pasuk says in Achri, this week's parsha. In Perak Yud Ches, it says the first source is Ervas Achei Sevicha Lo Segala. It says the father's sister is forbidden to be intimate with. Says the Braisa. Now this is whether it's his father's sister Mina Av from the same father, whether from the same mother. Says the Braisa. Do you really say that this is Bein Mina Av, Bein Mina Aim is when the same father, same or from the mother? Maybe it's only if they have the same father, not the same mother. Maybe just having the same mother would not qualify for the erva of achais avicha. Says the Brayso Bedinu. Now, logic would tell us as follows: Chayiv kan v'chayiv b'achaisa. Here, there's a liability, and there's a liability by one's own sister. Now, ma'achaisa is just like a person's own sister. That's beim and av, beim and aim. That's whether if it's the same father or whether the same mother. Because actually the pasuk explicitly tells you basa vicha oy basi mecha. Pasuk explicitly tells you that it's forbidden to be intimate with a sister that they have the paternal sister or the maternal sister. So Afghan, so to be here by the father's sister is beim and av, beim and aim. It's whether it's his paternal or maternal sister. Oh, I said the Bais no maybe not. Maybe you should go a different direction and say as follows: Chayiv kan v'chayiv b'deidasai. Yes, there's a liability over here by the father's sister, and there's a liability by the father's sister-in-law, meaning by his aunt. Madoidasa, just like his aunt, is mina av v'loy mina aim, is only his paternal aunt, not maternal. Meaning, if his uncle, who is his father's brother, was only his maternal brother, not his paternal brother, his wife actually is not an Everton, which the Gemara later on is going to ask how do you know that. So maybe Afkan, maybe also over here by the father's sister, there's also maybe mina av v'loy mina aim, a different aunt. Meaning by it's his father's sister, not his father's brother's wife. Maybe it's only from the same father, not from the same mother. So says the Brayso nearly be done. Let's see which one it's comparable to. Maybe you'll say, Don and Isabba Me'elu. Let's learn that a prohibition that's automatic, which is not something based on an action that you're doing, like a father's sister, Misabba Me'elu. From also a sister that's by itself, which is his own sister. You can't prove it from the aunt. That's not an issa that came by itself. Rather, it came through the kedushin of his uncle. So it wouldn't make sense to learn from the dasai, which that's not similar to that of achayis ha'av. Maybe you could go a different way, and you could say no. Maybe Dan and Karevi ha'av. Maybe you should learn out the relatives of the father, which is his father's sister. Mikrevi ha'av from the father's relative, which is his brother's wife, which is also this person's aunt, which is also the father's relative. And you can't prove it from the case of the sister, which is his own relatives and not his father's relatives. So since you cannot learn it out from logic, so therefore you're stuck. So Tamalema, that's where you need to have a second pasuk in Parashas Kedoshim that says in Perek Chav, it says Ervas Achei Sevicha Lo Segala, and you don't have to warn about the father's sister because you already warned the Parashas Achrei Ma'is in this week's parasha. And it should have only said the punishment, like it did by Esha Sacha by Chaisai, where it says Ish Kika Chais Av Chais Imai Avayim Yisau. So it's an extra pasuk. What do you need it for? It's coming to include the father's sister. That Bein Mina Av, Bein Mina Aim. It's coming to tell you that the father's sister can be prohibited, whether it's from the same father or whether it's from the same mother. And the same thing is when it says in the pasuk Erba Sachais Imcha Lo Segala. Regarding the mother's sister, that's also extra to tell you Bein Mina Av, Bein Mina Aim, whether from the same father or from the same mother. Because you also already know the mother's sister. What are you saying it for? You're coming to tell me that it's also even from the same mother, not only from the same father. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Why did I have to write this extra pasuk by both of them? B'chais Av and b'chais Aim. Just write one of them and you'll learn out the other one. Meaning a parent sibling a sister is going to be forbidden. Why do you have to write it by both father and mother? Says no, you need both. Remember, boy says strichi. You need them. Because the Ikaz had been only written by the father's sister. I would say over there it's even going to be problematic when he has this only from the same mother, because it's your father's sister. Now, a father family is called family. Like it says in the beginning of Bamidbar, the paternal family is very strong. So therefore, since there's yichus based on the father, they could say that the father's sister, even from the same mother, is going to be prohibited. But just the mother's sister, which is not as strong as a relationship, I would say if they're only sisters from the mother, that wouldn't work. And I can tell you logic the other way too. Because had the Torah told you that by the mother's sister that worked even from the same mother, yes, you know what? She came by dois. That means for sure it's his relative. But the father's sister, maybe Chas V'Shalom it's not his father, because a mother, the baby's born. We see the baby, we know definitively. But the father, you don't know for sure it's the father. So Imalai, I would say maybe it's not such a strong relationship, and therefore if it's only the father's sister from the mother, it wouldn't work. We needed to say both of them to say that Achais Ha'ab and Achais Ha'im works both if it's their sister from the same father or from the same mother. Now, a similar type of a questioning, the Gemara continues, it says, okay, meaning regarding something we had mentioned, we said, well, we're going to explain it shortly. The ant that was so obvious to the Tana, which we were using that as a chip in the bargaining of how to figure out the halacha of Achais Ha'av. Is it going to be Mina Av and Mina Aim or only Mina Av or Mina Aim? One that started them to say that it's going to be only Mina Av or Mina Aim was from Doidasa. With the ant, you see it Mina Av or Mina Aim, that's only from the father. If it's the father's brother's wife, that it's his paternal brother, now his maternal brother. Minole, where did the Tana know that obviously that the Doidasa is only if it's his father's paternal brother's wife and not maternal? So Amarava, because he says, Asi doi doi doi, we have Gzeir Shava of doi doi doi. What's the Gzeir Shava? Because Ksevach, it says over here in the Parasha of Arayas, Ervas doi doi gila, that he's not allowed to have a relationship with his aunt. Ksevach, it says over there, when someone sells himself as a slave to a non-Jew, it says, Oi doi doi, oi ben doi doi galena. Either his uncle or the son of his uncle should redeem him. Now, just like over there it says the word doi doi. It's only from the father, meaning it's his father's paternal brother, not his father's maternal brother, because that the father's paternal brother is the relative regarding redemption more, and the mitzvah of redemption is on him more than the maternal relatives. And Afkan and Avalim, so to over here, it's on when it says Doidasa, it's going to be the father's paternal brother's wife and not maternal. So it's about, wait a second, how do you know over there by Oy Doi Doi Ben Doi Doi Galena who's talking about specifically the father's paternal brother, not maternal brother? So Amakrab, because it says in the pasuk, Mishpachto Yigalena, from his family you're going to redeem him, which is teaching us Mishpachas Av Kurui Mishpacha. The father's family is called Mishpacha, and Mishpachas Aim Inikur Mishpacha. But the mother's family is not called Mishpacha because it's telling you that by the mitzvah of redemption, it's telling you Mishpachtoi, from his family you're going to redeem him. And we know elsewhere, as we said in the beginning by Midbar, that Mishpacha is that of Lebeis Avoisam. So therefore, when it says over there, just like over there regarding redemption, it says mishpacha, and mishpacha is from the father, and there it means mina'av, v'lem aim. So to over here by the isra of arayis of daidasa is also going to be mina'av, v'lem aim, and that's why the Tana took that for granted, and that's why it was a question: are we going to compare tachaisai, which is bein mina'av aim, or daidasa, which only mina'av v'lem aim? That we didn't know that we need a pasuk, an extra pasuk, to teach you that the isra of achaisai is going to be bein mina'av, bein aim. Thank you for anytime.